Everybody, there's the recording. Good morning. Welcome to Making Digital Accessibility Work. Uh, they'll be introducing themselves shortly here. We would like to ask for you to hold questions until the end. Online participants, please feel free to type them into chat. I'll be monitoring that, and we'll get those read off for you at the end. And with that, we shall begin.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. Hey, everybody. It's nice to see you all this morning. I hope you've had a great time to check out the keynote. It's really wonderful talks, and I'm looking forward to seeing a bunch more through the rest of the day. So come on in. So today, we're here to talk a little bit about digital accessibility, talking about how to try to apply some practical strategies to what you do in your day-to-day work to make digital accessibility work for you. And we're going to jump in quickly with a few introductions at least, and hopefully kind of keep things moving because I hopefully want to leave enough time for some good Q&A at the end. So nice to meet all of you. My name is Al Nemec. My pronouns are he, him, his. I currently serve as the Digital Accessibility Program Manager within the Center for User Experience, which is, if you don't know, it's part of Do It Academic Technology or Do It Academic Technology's major sort of area here within AT. We have a big space within the Center for User Experience that's dealing with user experience as well as academic technology. I'm sorry, especially digital accessibility. So it's been a great thing to kind of bring this into the fold here. And with me is Mark. So Mark, take it away.
And if I need to move the mic, let me know. I'm happy to move for a stream. But I'm Mark Whittaker. My pronouns are he, him as well. I'm the Deputy ADA Coordinator for Digital Accessibility. That's a new position, so if you haven't heard of it, you're fine. Feel free to reach out and we can chat and see if I can help you. But I'm with the Office of Compliance, so where Al is a lot of like, how do we do this? My job is going to be, why do we have to do this? What is telling us that we have to do this?
Awesome. So today, hopefully kind of jump through a few things. I know we don't have a lot of time, but we want to really kind of get you started on a few pieces if you haven't been involved in digital accessibility as of yet. The first thing is we're going to talk about how we get started in this space, as well as we're going to get into applying that work. How do we verify our work? Talk about some of the resources and some things that you can all take with you. You may have seen that QR code sort of in an introductory slide. There's going to be another one at the very end. So all of the links that we talk about today, we want to make sure you all have an opportunity to kind of investigate on your own time, and as well, hopefully leave some time for some Q&A. So with that, I'm going to pass things back over to you, Mark.
So a lot of what we're doing, and again, my job is the why do we have to do this? We can talk about why accessibility is important. There are a lot of those reasons. I think if you're here, you probably already know this. You probably already feel this. You know, we have, I think statistically, it's depending on which report you look at, it's anywhere from like 15 to 25% of folks have a disability of some form. And so accessibility will help them have access to these things. I know, going off script a little bit, from a personal perspective, I have a visual impairment. So without accessibility efforts, I couldn't be here today. You know, I can like navigate airports. I could get a college degree and get a job, right? And that's sort of what we're doing for folks as well. We're providing opportunity. And really accessibility, when I talk about it as an equitable experience. So we want to make sure that everybody they can obtain the same information, they can perform the same functions, they get the same access to information, they can have the same amount of privacy as everybody has. We don't have to ask for help. We don't have to expose our personal information to be able to gain access to a system. And we can do it quickly. You know, we don't need to ask for alternative means to get in there, wait 2 weeks for those alternative means to be developed, and then finally get that access. More boring, I suppose, is that a lot of this is mandated federally. The Americans with Disabilities Act, since the 90s, has said that we need to provide this equal access. And more recently, the Department of Justice has published the rule to Title II. They published the update, which is any public institution or entity needs to make sure all of their digital assets are available to all people immediately. Again, that equitable access. Now, one thing I will point out, a big key with this federal rule, that equal access isn't new. The ADA has been the law for, I think, 35 years. We're celebrating the anniversary this year. But the new thing that's come from this is applying a technical standard, WCAG 2.1, and that deadline for applying the standard is April 24th, 2026. And because we are a public institution and our size, we will definitely be in that deadline. And that'll mean some updates. If anybody's familiar with the current policy, we'll have to update that to be compliant with the law, because there were like, if you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but there were like some staggered releases that were going to happen there. But with the new deadline, we can't afford to stagger that anymore. And then, yeah, so for what must be accessible, it's really easy to say all digital tools, but a lot of folks want to know what that means. So some of this will be easier than others. Websites and web forms, I think there are a lot of resources that exist for that now, so we can start moving on that. Software apps, so like desktop or mobile, that can be a little bit harder to test. Multimedia, we're going to talk about things like captions or audio descriptions and transcripts. Social media content, so stuff that we post out to folks, we need to make sure we're including all text and good links. Course content, no shortage of that going on. Library content, and also some internal stuff. So things that employees are going to use to access materials, we need to make sure that that's accessible. And our documents that we share. So everything from PowerPoint to PDF to Excel and Word. We want to take advantage of accessibility features available to us there.
All right. So with a lot of that, there's a lot of other efforts that are happening around to try to continue to develop some of the sort of resources and different guidance that's going to be out there. Just to give you a sense, obviously this is something that we all have involvement, we all have a responsibility to make our materials accessible. The big things as well that we have out there is trying to plan around how we can try to focus our attention on this in a sort of collective manner and make sure we're all following the same path. Some of the campus-wide initiatives that are working around this are the University Digital Accessibility Initiative, or the UDAI. There's also a lot of coordination within the universities, as well as our Big Ten peers. I'm excited to see that there's a lot of participation with that group with us today, in fact, with the conference. So it's going to be great to continue to work with them in all of these pieces. There's also a lot of work happening within different units in campus, of course. The Center for User Experience does this work as well. For those that don't know, we continue to do an evaluation service, which is there to provide for you some method to get a better and deeper understanding of the accessibility of a particular material or resource you might have. So for those of you that have something like that, where you've gone through trying to make those things accessible, but still find maybe some uncertainty in knowing that, we can definitely encourage you to reach out. There's also a lot of coordination and support within the Digital Accessibility Policy role. The Office of Compliance, of course, working with Mark and his team and knowing that what we do is working within the correct bounds of what we need to comply with and why. And of course, there's a lot of folks in the community. So we have folks within the Digital Accessibility Liaison Network. For those of you that I know that are a few of you in the room that are part of that, thank you for being part of that and thank you for your work there. And there's a lot of folks as well as in the community of practice. So if you aren't already involved and interested in getting involved, the community of practice is open to everyone. There's well over 400 members at this point. We do active communication and collaboration on Microsoft Teams, just as sort of a nice, great asynchronous way of asking questions. There's also a great opportunity to sort of engage and learn more. We do tend to do sort of a bi-monthly sort of check-in. There's always hybrid or Zoom calls that are available for us to learn more about certain activities or certain opportunities to learn more about what you can be doing in digital accessibility. So next, a little bit about applying accessibility to your work. All right, so yeah, we're going to look at each other a little bit because there's a little bit of a question. Whose slide was this again? Definitely one of these cases here. So, when you're thinking about what are the things you can be doing, there's definitely things that are going to pertain to you depending on your role, depending on what you do. However, there are some general things that you can apply no matter who you are, and these are some of the things you really want to think about. So first and foremost, when we talk about making all of our material accessible, I think a lot of us tend to immediately go to well, I have a lot of materials. I have a lot of things that I've currently produced or made over the years. The big thing is, start to think about what materials that you still need to maintain, still things that you use or actively use as part of a university program. Those are things you're going to want to focus on. But there may be a lot of materials that you don't necessarily need to focus on at this point. So it's really important to try to reduce that surface area of what sort of things you need to address. The other thing is going to be learning about those best practices. So talked a little bit about ways to do that already. There's going to be some space in the community to do that. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of resources as well that are going to help you do that. But learn more about what you can be doing going forward so you don't have sort of this continuous buildup of more materials you need to address later. You're going to be able to then apply best practices just like you do in sort of producing any document. Right, so you might have, going through things and doing appropriate spell check and grammar check. These are the kind of things you want to do in part with that. Make sure you're doing those accessibility checks. Some of these tools are built right into the tools you already use. You may or may not know that already, but a lot of these things you can do right off the bat. So, and last, of course, make sure you do go back and review and improve those documents and things that you are going to actively use. So if you have a library of things, it's important to start to think about what materials you do have, what things you're going to continue to use moving forward, and how you might be able to improve that. So that's a big one, apart from, I think every sort of thing we do. When Mark, you talked about all the different formats, documents, I think we all produce documents. There's a lot of other categories of things we're thinking about, but there's a lot of materials I think all of us tend to engage with and produce daily. Beyond that, though, we really want to talk a little bit about things with developers as well. So we have a couple of things. Mark, I know you may have had this one as well. Do you want to jump into this? Sure.
So again, so when we talk about accessibility, one of the things is folks are using tools to access our content sometimes. A common one we're all maybe familiar with is screen readers. And so we can think of screen readers almost as like another user agent. So when we write our code and our HTML is published, the web browser knows how to read that. Well, the screen reader will take that same markup and it will follow the same, well, a lot of its own rules, but it follows those rules as well. So making sure that our markup conveys the structure and meaning is really important. Common thing we'll see here is something that visually appears to be a heading, but it doesn't have the heading tag, or the other way around where somebody applied a heading tag because they really just wanted bigger, bold text in that case. So just using tags for their intended meaning. Including alt text for images and icons is a really big one. Again, folks probably have heard this one before. But if an image is meant to communicate something, or if an icon has an action, we want to make sure that screen readers have that information as well. And also, if for some reason that image fails to load, we can have that text there so that that meaning can still be communicated. Yeah, so kind of going back to the markup one a little bit is we can make sure that all of our form controls have associated labels, because that will tell a screen reader when we get to a field the purpose of that input, as well, not just the label, but the role and the name and value. We want to be able to communicate all of those items to screen reader users. Yeah, keyboard accessibility. This is one that, we want to make sure our links are all correct. We can tab to them. We don't want to play around with the tab index unless we really need to. But this is probably one of those cases where folks in the room may be familiar, accessibility is good usability. And I know the more I programmed, the less I used my mouse, and I would just tab through websites a lot before I even needed to consider accessibility. Avoiding CAPTCHAs, another usability, accessibility crossover here. But CAPTCHAs introduce a lot of problems for accessibility and can make things really difficult. And then we can review accessibility as we're working. So I know I would use a linter a lot that would catch accessibility errors as I was writing my code. And we can prevent pushing inaccessible code even to our repositories by working that into our pipelines.
One thing I want to just ask too is with the group, I know that a lot of you may or may not consider yourselves developers, but you may or may not contribute to a website, considering that a lot of campus these days is on WordPress. As a CMS, you have a lot of impact on a lot of these aspects, maybe not all of them, but alternative text, right? That's a big one. If you're managing a website, even just from a content standpoint, try to keep these sort of things in mind for sure. Yeah.
So linters are in not working WordPress. If I'm working in my code editor IDE, so like Microsoft Visual Studios, I can have an add-on to it that will read my code as I'm writing it. And sort of like how a word processor would catch bad grammar or a spelling error, the linter would put little red squigglies under my code to say, hey, you have an image, but you don't have an alt text attribute here. As one example. And then it's CI/CDs, continuous integration, continuous deployment or development?
Deployment.
Deployment, yeah. So as we write code and we push it to a repository, it can run some jobs there, and that can check our code for errors and prevent pushing something to production if it has those errors without getting it approved by somebody. It's just putting more things, because even as a developer who's aware of accessibility, I've made mistakes too, right? Like we do these things sometimes, and these tools are here to just help catch us, a little bit of a safety net on the developer side.
A great question, Matt. And by the way, for those remote, the question there was basically about what is a CI/CD or what is a linter, and how that relates to a lot of the work. But yeah, it's good answer. And it kind of makes that relation to what exactly making some of this more automatic is, right? I've been guilty as a developer in the past, also completely ignoring certain browsers that I should be testing with. So this is an example of making that a part of your process so you cannot forget it.
And then documents. So this will touch a little bit on some things that Al had mentioned earlier, but and a lot of the concepts will be the same from web because web really is just a document, right? But we want to provide accurate and succinct titles. So this, so in the web, we may have a specific page title, but in a Word document, that first heading will be our page title. That will let users know the purpose of the document as they start getting into it. Using headings as well to build out the document structure. A really common way for screen reader users to navigate any content is the H key while your screen reader is active. We'll skip 2 headings and it lets me skim content the way a fully sighted user would do it same way. Again, text alternatives for images if those have meaning to them. Clear, concise, and easy to read content. So I think one thing working in a university, some of our content creators are still treating basic content almost like a dissertation. We've got to consider the audience we're writing for and the wider audience in using plain language when possible. Accessibility checkers in the software, again, something Al touched on. Word, PowerPoint, Outlook. Does Excel have an accessibility checker? I'm not sure. But there are tabs to do a lot of these checks in the document as you're working on it that will catch things like color contrast or missing alt text or missing headers and will help us make those changes before we send that document out to folks. If there are approved templates, we should consider using those because a lot of times that will maintain a lot of the document structure. Like PowerPoint can be really finicky as we start to add content to it and it will change the reading order. So having a template that already has a lot of that in place and sticking to it can help us a lot. And then sharing the source document when possible. PDF can be difficult for accessibility, even when a lot of the intention is there and we put a lot of work into it. So if we can just share the Word document or the PowerPoint, that can help folks a lot. I guess we go back to web. So for designing websites, consistent navigation is really important. So making sure a header is where folks will expect it. Maybe if we have like sidebar navigation, the same links when possible across both of those spaces. Being able to skip those links as well to get into the main content, another advantage. Using color alone to convey meaning is a big one. So we may see this with like status, like a red light that says someone's active in Teams, right? A red light that says we're there, a red light that says we're off. On a website, if folks who are colorblind or can't see, that circle has lost all meaning to them. So some combination between the circle and a symbol, so maybe a green check and a red X. Using those in combination. Avoiding content that starts automatically, those videos or those sliders where we just start, or the GIFs that just as fun as they can be very distracting for some folks, or even cause nausea in some cases for content that will just automatically start. There are techniques around that we can discuss later, either just not having that content at all or respecting the user's settings that they have on their operating system to deliver alternative content there. Again, going back to using approved themes. So I am pretty new to the university, but I know we have some WordPress themes that are already out there and that are very, if you're on WordPress, I suppose you can get to them. But a lot of the accessibility has already been accounted for in a lot of that. And similarly, if using code blocks or components that already have accessibility baked into them, so instead of making your own accordion, has somebody already built that we can just pull their accordion in or their slider, and that's already accessible. And then testing before publishing, just making sure that before we release this to the world that it is accessible and that we have crossed those T's and dotted those I's. Okay, the multimedia, sorry, I thought I was done there. So with multimedia, a lot of this is going to come down to planning. We want to make sure that we're writing a script for our content, right? That script can include not just what we're going to say, but we want to use that as an opportunity for basic and extended audio descriptions to make sure that any information in the video is still being communicated to somebody who can't see that. Captions are really important for the spoken words. So that's the text version of what's being spoken. And we want to identify our speakers and intent there. One example we've seen is something happens and maybe a trombone plays. Adding context to that would be important. Maybe something sad happens, so it would be like a bum, bum, bum. So you would say sad trombone, and to kind of drive that point home for folks. And again, yeah, audio descriptions is anything that's presented visually, but not through text. So if we have a class and there's a chart and a professor says, now as we can see in this chart, this is a bad thing. We may need to provide an audio description to talk about what's in that chart and, kind of go into it, unless the professor or the instructor does, break the chart down in their content. And then transcripts. Transcripts are really great for audio only, for something like podcast. But then we also have descriptive transcripts, which are almost like a novel, where we'll say this person said this and then this happens. And sometimes these descriptive transcripts can be used in place of audio descriptions and the extended audio. But again, to get to that point, it requires a lot of planning and knowing your content before you publish it.
All right. So thank you for all the detail on that, Mark. And there's a lot to go through with these pieces. So what we're hoping to talk about a little bit now is a little bit about how you might verify some of that accessibility, because there's a lot to think about and a lot of things you might be running through. As you run through some of the applications that you work with day in, day out, like as Mark mentioned, things like Word or PowerPoint, there are checkers built right in. In fact, at the bottom sort of left-hand corner of a lot of those programs, you're going to see accessibility checker, and you can click on that and it's going to give you a little bit of a run through based on your document. What are those things you might need to check? Those sort of checkers, we tend to think of them as automated, right? These are the automated checkers, the ones that are sort of trying to do its best to look at your information, look at your content, and try to give you a sense of what sort of changes you need to make. Like, hey, you may have missed a heading here, or we look at this sort of particular image, we see you not having the alternative text here. Can you please add some? Automated checkers are really, really great to give you a general sense. They're not necessarily going to cover everything. These automated checkers don't necessarily have context for the content you're putting in there. They don't know how it's being used. They're not going to do the information as well as you can. And as sort of as mentioned by Mark, there's multiple sort of formats within sort of some of these formats that you might be working, like multimedia, where any sort of automation or check of that nature is not going to know the information and how it's being perceived or how it's being delivered to the end user. So when you're thinking about automated checkers, there's a couple of different ways, though, you can leverage these. If you're talking about things like websites, for example, there's a bunch of them out there. If you may have already used them already, if you've ever heard or seen the application Wave, if you've ever opened up perhaps the web inspector in your browser and seen there's a little tab there on Chromium or Chrome called Lighthouse, and there's a whole bunch of other tools and extensions you may have been able to download already from, let's say, the Chrome Web Store that are giving you similar capabilities. And these sort of things just tend to look at the singular page you're looking at right now, let's say in the case of a website, give you a sense of exactly what you might be needing to address at that point. We've mentioned sort of through that developer column, we've mentioned a little bit of things about like linting and pipelines. A lot of those are really great ideas and sort of techniques for developers or development teams to engage with, just because it sort of, again, makes that step of double checking your accessibility a little bit more automatic, a little bit of something that you're always doing by default. If you're looking at documents, though, and you're really trying to think of day in, day out sort of things, look at that accessibility checker in the bottom left-hand corner of some of those Microsoft Office programs. If you're using Google Docs, which I think a lot of us tend to be day in, day out, there is an extension available to everyone here at UW-Madison called Grackle. That is something that you can add to Google Docs at any point. You simply go up to the extensions menu in the top. You'll go to add-on extensions and you'll type in Grackle. You'll find that they're available. As long as you sign in with your campus login, you can utilize that. So that'll help you check things like Google Docs, Google Sheets, and Google Slides. Similarly, it does just like what the Word checker does as well, as it's going to kind of go through and look at your document and try to let you know what sort of things you might need to be missing or you might be missing at that point. Beyond that, though, what happens beyond these automatic checks, right? The manual checkers are really kind of trying to more emulate the actual use of assistive technologies or really use assistive technologies. So in the case of things like screen readers, NVDA is a free one that's available for Windows. macOS VoiceOver is built right into macOS. These are some of the different tools that you could utilize if you want to sort of look at and engage how screeners actually work. You get to leverage the actual technologies and get a sense of exactly what that person might be experiencing. These things can be challenging to get into, but if you do take the time and start to look at these things, we do recommend you take a look. We'll go over some resources at the end, but there are some guides for you to learn how to sort of engage with some of these tools as well. There's a few other things you can look at too, like color contrast, magnification, and keyboard. These sort of things look at folks with color blindness, as well as those who are looking for larger type or larger user interfaces. How do those magnify? And keyboard navigation, as Mark mentioned, sometimes just being able to tab through a user interface and be able to get through all the content equally and evenly. So I know we're running a little on time, so I'm going to try to move things along here pretty quick. There's a few other tools, and we're going to, by the way, as I mentioned, we're at the top here, we're going to make sure that everything here is available for you to look at and sort of take in at your own time. But some of the word testing or some of the tools for documents, as I mentioned, things like Grackle, things like testers built into Word. PDFs, there is a checker built into Adobe Acrobat. However, it is a very difficult one to use. So as I think Mark had some great advice there, which is if you can, go back to that original format. Try to work within the document that you exported to PDF first. Look at what you can do there. Websites, if you haven't already engaged with those, if you do website publishing at any form, you can always go to your website, go to what's being seen by the user. And if you happen to go to your browser, on most browsers, both Firefox or Chrome, for example, you can right click, say that go to inspect, and there'll be a set of tools there. Now, these tools can be a little bit daunting, but there's one that's on Chrome, for example, called Lighthouse. It's going to give you a good way to run an accessibility check, let you know what you're missing, let you know if you've maybe missed a heading or things that can be adjusted there. Course content. I don't know how many of you may be dealing with Canvas content or publishing the Canvas. There is a tool built in there as well. So You Do It is available to everyone here publishing or administering a Canvas course. It's a tool similar to a lot of these other automated checkers where they're going to help you go through, look through what things you can address and adjust. And these are tools that we're continuing to evolve as well. So while there's You Do It available right now today, things that I mentioned in terms of those central coordination committees as well are working on trying to advance and improve the tools that we have available to us. Multimedia, we have a few things revolving around captioning. So I think, as we look at tools like Kaltura, if you've published content there, Kaltura does enable something or does let you request something called machine captioning. Machine captioning is helpful in the sense that it's there. However, the accuracy is limited. And I see the faces, yeah. Its accuracy can leave a lot to be desired. If you actually can, from a standpoint of just looking at it before publishing, you can really kind of get a chuckle out of what it does with some of the proper nouns. But with that in mind, it is still something that can sometimes give you a leg up. It gets it started for you, but we encourage you to go back in and take a look with the tools that Kaltura provides to improve the accuracy of what you're providing there. The goal is to obviously try to make that information as accurate to the real information as possible. Other emerging technologies, though, are things we're always keeping an eye on. AI is making some great advancements there. So captioning is, I think, going to continue to improve. And as those technologies become available and are vetted, these are the kind of things we're hoping will become more available on campus and at some point be able to make that captioning job a little bit easier. So a little bit on the procurement side, and I'm going to look between the two of us. I don't know which one of us wanted to cover this, but we can.
Yeah, sure. So I guess we'll say one big part with accessibility, we do buy tools, we buy resources. Let's make sure that those are accessible. So we would be the contacts there as well. Like the Office of Compliance, we can help you review and write that contract language. With Al and his team, they can actually perform, like he mentioned earlier, the evaluations on those to make sure that when the vendor says it's accessible, we'll keep them honest. And then we can start to talk about what the next steps are when it comes to procurement.
And you just left a couple of links up here as well to get a little bit more information if you'd like. The rest of this, we're going to save for all of you to be able to engage with at your own time. We'll provide a QR code at the end if you're looking for these slides. They're available right now. And they have a series of links for things on how you can engage in various categories. But knowing that we're limited on time, Jason, I don't know if you'd like to take some things and see if we have any room for questions potentially.
Unfortunately, 1 minute left in our allotted time, and conferences wait for nobody. So I think best way maybe to wrap this up here is if people have follow-up questions, you gave some good websites there. What are some good email addresses or Teams channels to get a hold of you on so that they can engage more with this?
Yes, so absolutely. Thank you for that. And there's a couple things you can do. First of all, if you'd like to, you're again welcome to pull up the slides here. We'll have a series of slides at the end with resources, as well as some of those links that Jason mentioned. If you want to contact any of us at the center, I recommend using Center for UX at wisc.edu. There's a great way for us to contact us there. We can engage with you as well. If you go to centerforux.wisc.edu as well, we have a form that you can fill out that helps kind of get things started. We also like to make things as approachable as possible. So if you just want to have a quick conversation and you feel like you just need some quick advice, you can also sign up there for office hours, which we conduct every Wednesdays and Thursdays to sort of just sit down and get 20 minutes with us and ask a few things about what you should be doing more. So yeah,
I'm new and I'm looking for folks to talk to. So feel free to reach out and say hi, ask any questions. We're building up towards the office hours, but because I'm newer, my schedule still has some open time. So I'm remote and miss people. So, you know, if you want to chat, just feel free to send an invite, and I'm always happy to see what your needs are and to help.
we're definitely doing knocked office hours too. So, I mean, just sign up.
Yeah,
Knocked all of it.
I block off hours to get dragged into that if I'm needed
Yeah.
as well. So.
But thank you very much.